Before we start this hearing, I do just want to add on to my last announcement about submitting fund sources for your wish list items. Please submit that to Mr. Cooper. I did not tell you who to submit it to. If you have to submit those fund source items, submit that to Mr. Cooper, please. And we will follow up with a letter and email to the entire council as well. Before us with the Public Defender's Office, we have the Public Defender, Ms. Dawn Diener, and with her we have the Administrative Services Manager, Ms. Annette Crutchfield, to do the presentation. Before you begin your presentation, Ms. Diener, are you satisfied with the Mayor's proposal for your department?
To answer that question, I would say yes, we are satisfied. And we are satisfied primarily because it passes along to our office increased recurring funds that Metro will be receiving from the state in fiscal year 14. And I want to speak briefly on that this evening because that funding is a huge accomplishment for our office and frankly for Metro. I will spare you all of the year and a half's worth of details to that and give you a brief overview of how we were able to obtain that increased state funding. Our office receives a combination of funding from both Metro and the state. I became the public defender about 5 years ago, right when the recession was hitting. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I was involved in a budget process that wasn't just about cuts. So a few years ago, the state's budget situation improved, and for the first time in my term as public defender, they were providing increases for employee salaries. And at the time, I thought that was going to mean an increase for Metro, for our office. And it did, but not near the amount of increase that I thought it would. And so I started looking at that point at how we were receiving our increases from the state. Memphis actually became our partner in this because they are funded the same way Metro Nashville Public Defender Services are, and we're the only two places like that in the state. And what we found was what we believed to be a problem in the formula that the state was using to calculate our annual increases. We brought that to light last year, and we're not able to make enough progress to make a difference for last year's budget. But with the help of our legislative delegation this year again, and the mayor's administration, and particularly the finance department, we kept the pressure on. And this year, what that meant for us was progress. And the governor's administration acknowledged that their funding for Metro's public defender services hadn't even kept pace with inflation over the last 20 years. And so they recommended a recurring base budget increase for Metro for public defender services here of $512,000 for this coming fiscal year. And those are recurring dollars. To put that in a little perspective for all of you, the last 20 years before that, we had a total increase of $508,000 in 20 years. And so this year alone, we have essentially gotten an increase that's the equivalent of 20 years worth of increases under the old formula. And so I really need to give credit where credit is due on that. We had a lot of help from the administration, from the finance department, and from our legislative delegation in getting that accomplishment done. But that's a true, real victory for us. And it came at a time, frankly, when we really needed it. Our employees are our best asset. They are the bulk of what our budget goes to pay for. And they work very hard. They are dedicated to the mission of our office. And for the last 5 years, they have worked hard without really receiving any pay increases. So this is going to mean, hopefully for them, assuming that our increases remain intact through the budget process, it will mean for them some recognition this year financially of the hard work that they have done. They also represent, frankly, a real challenge for our office at this point in terms of keeping employees, particularly attorneys. Over 5 years' time, an attorney gains a lot of experience and becomes marketable outside doing other attorney work. They can hang up a shingle, they can go elsewhere, but they gain valuable experience. And what we're really seeing right now is after 5 years of not having pay increases, lawyers are starting to do that in our office. I've already had 3 lawyers resign just this year so far, and I know more are looking. And they're looking because they want to be able to count on advancing as they become more experienced. You only need to look at the state pay scale system to understand that that's a reality. The state has actually built into its pay scale system annual step increases for its assistant public defenders and its assistant district attorneys to make sure that as training is happening and as they gain experience, that they have an incentive to stay in that government work or public interest work. Tori, I think, our District Attorney General, has spoken to this body and to the Mayor's office as well during their hearings about his issues in terms of keeping attorney staff. And how he has chosen to deal with that over the years is to continue, over the last 5 years really, to continue giving his Metro employees raises, even though Metro hasn't been able to fund those raises, because his state employees, his state attorneys, were getting raises. And that really leads me to the other issue that I wanted to address with you this evening. It is something I provided a memo about just because I wanted to give you a little background and something in writing that you could have. This year's budget for the District Attorney General's office, as the Mayor's recommended, includes an increase of $238,000 for salary equalization. This year's budget, recommended budget from the Mayor, does not include an increase in funding from Metro for our office. Now, we are certainly grateful and happy to have the increased state funding, but I also think it's my obligation to bring out any concerns that I might have about how the Mayor's budget may or may not be consistent with what I think is required. And so that's the last thing that I want to address. Tennessee Code Annotated 162518 requires that any increase in local funding for positions or office expense for the DA shall be accompanied by 75% increase to the public defender. And that's for local funding. I read that statute as requiring Metro to provide a 75% increase to the public defender's office when it increases funding for positions or office expense to the district attorney. Now, since the Mayor's budget was released, I have communicated with the Finance Department about this, and I think where our posture is at this point is we have agreed to disagree. It is, I think, primarily a matter of statutory interpretation, perhaps, but they have explained, and obviously I think Mr. Riedling is here. If I get this wrong, I know he will correct me. I think as they interpret where we stand right now, there are 2 reasons they don't think that 75% increase should be due to the public defender's office this year. The first is that because right now Metro, in fact, funds the public defender's office with Metro dollars at a higher percentage than 75%. So the position is we're already providing greater than 75% funding, and so an increase is not due this year. Now that is factually accurate, and I think in large part because the state has not kept up with its funding responsibilities for the public defender's office in the last 20 years. Metro has really had to share in a slightly greater burden than what the law might require, and they have done that, and we certainly appreciate that. I don't think it is in line with the statute to say that because we are currently getting more than 75%, that the statute doesn't apply in this circumstance. But that is the position that the Finance Department has taken on that. And the second issue being that the $238,000 that the DA's office is getting in local funding this year is not for positions. And that is that's an interpretation that I just respectfully disagree with. So I wanted to bring that issue to your attention, to ask you to consider it, and to ask that if the budget is passed as it is, as the Mayor's budget is written, that this body consider putting in a 75% funding increase to the Public Defender's Office consistent with that statute. And the last thing I would say is that I watched Tory's hearing too, and I know that he asked this body for an additional 2 positions and funding for 2 positions for his office. And I would simply ask that if that in fact does make it off the wish list into what the council proposes for the budget, that the 75% funding statute would also apply as well, and we would ask that the council consider appropriating the 75% funds to our office as well. With that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Diener. Council Lady Berry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. It's great to see you both. I have a quick question first on your budget book, E4, where you have noted that with the gang prosecution program, a funding reduction because of a grant expiration. That's 42.7.
That's actually, the E4 page is for the district attorney.
Oh, so sorry. My apologies. I'm trying to figure out. Well, that leads me to my next question then.
All right.
So I was one of the ones who supported proposing for the district attorney 2 of the positions that he had requested. Mm-hmm. You are asking, I think, then for 75% then for and what would that $90,000 go toward if that were to be something that would be added back into your budget? What would that do?
I think at this point, given where we stand with our needs, we would likely hire additional attorneys.
And would you need to hire those attorneys because of the work that
Yes.
he's doing on his side? I mean, I absolutely understand that there needs to be a balance on either side so that not one side doesn't have more resources than the other. So explain what that might look like if you might be so kind.
I can. First of all, I would say, and I think Tory mentioned this during his hearing, the state is woefully behind in terms of evaluating the workload that exists across the state within district attorney offices as well as in public defender offices. And they are working in the next year or 2 to try to collect better data and to do weighted caseload studies across the state. I think both Tory and I are confident that if they can get those studies done statewide, they are going to establish that both our district attorney's office and our public defender's office are doing way more work than we are staffed to really handle adequately. And so we would think that those types of studies would show that both his office and my office should be receiving substantially greater state funds given the volume of work that we are doing. So we're already starting at this point behind the 8 ball. Our workloads are way higher than they should be, than what the recommended the current standards are for weighted caseload studies. The additional funding would allow us to, frankly, breathe a little bit. The last time we actually looked at the numbers, we thought we were somewhere in the vicinity, based upon the weighted caseload standards, somewhere around 20 lawyers understaffed. There's just no way you can hire 20 lawyers, though. And again, I would say that is really because of state funding problems. Metro has really kept up and exceeded its funding obligations. So if that additional money were to come to us, we would use it to primarily probably staff General Sessions Court, where we're exceeding, we have lawyers representing upwhere between 10, 15 clients a day, handling over 1,000 cases each year, which I think, the numbers add out, if you look at the data, to less than an hour to handle per client per case. So I think additional lawyers with that additional funding would help to ease some of that burden.
Thank you. I can't speak to what the disagreement is between the finance and your office, but since I did ask for the wish list addition, I will make it my job that if I can find the 120,000 to look for the 90 as well. And of course it is about looking for, and it is called a wish.
I understand.
But I appreciate it. Thank you for all you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Berry. Councilman Stein.
Thank you. And Don, in my almost 20 years around here, clearly I understand that the Public Defender's Office has oftentimes been treated as a stepchild because of the difficult work you do. Your analysis here, though, puts us in a little bit of a difficult situation here. clearly you're a respected lawyer and have given us one reading of the statute. I went to law school with Mr. Riebling, so I don't necessarily trust his opinion, but this is not Mr. Riebling's budget. This is a former public defender who's now mayor of Nashville's budget, and clearly, apparently, he doesn't agree. So I think council needs some kind of judgment on this, and Mr. Chair, I think we ought to go to a third lawyer, and I would request that we ask Mr. Solomon's office to give us an analysis of this and find out where we're coming down. And then I would also say that I'm not sure that can happen quick enough for this, so I would really recommend that we're not going to be in violation of the law. So clearly, if this interpretation of the statute is correct, we're going to have to rectify it, and I would think that the best way to do that is probably with the supplemental down the road, if indeed Ms. Diener's interpretation is correct. But that's just my 2 cents on it. But I would like the legal department to arbitrate this at least a little bit for us. Now I understand that may not be, obviously I know who he works for as well, but still that at least gives us a third opinion on this subject. And the other thing though, Don, if indeed we were not to fund the DA's office at all, if we were to take out that $200,000 that the mayor has put in, then there would be no obligation for additional funding for you all, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would not like to take away from somebody else, obviously.
All right, thank you, Councilman Stein. Mr. Cooper, could you please make that request to the law department? Councilman Banks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Diener, for the work you do. I know it's tough to do, so...
It's my honor, my honor.
Pleased to see that you do such a good job. I do think it is an interesting situation we're in. I was curious if the Finance Director might be able to comment on that. Rich, if you could help us with your interpretation of the statute.
I think the public defender described it pretty accurately. I mean, I don't think it's, it's not like we're fighting each other. Yeah. It's just an interpretation of it. And I think historically we've always funded the public defender in Nashville at a much greater level than other places do, and we've continued, I think, to fund the public defender. I'm not saying adequately, because I'm not sure that you could ever provide enough money to meet the needs. But I think what we think you have to look at is the totality of the local funding. I think that's the only kind of way you can sort of look at it. Otherwise, you're sort of piecemealing the whole operation from year to year. And I think if you look at it in the total of the budget and total amount of local funds that come to the public defender versus the DA, then we're at close to 80%. I can't remember, I got a sheet somewhere that shows me the numbers, but it's 80% or somewhere in that range, which puts us above that 75% number. So I'm not opposed to they do a great job. I mean, there's no question about the job that's done by the public defender's office and Ms. Diener, and she was tireless in her efforts to get the additional money from the state. I mean, she brought this to everyone's attention, and she, I'm sure she enjoyed every moment of working the halls of the General Assembly.
Of course I did. They're probably watching.
That's right. Of course we did. We all do. We all do. And it was an interesting experience for all of us. And so, I think, it's just a difference of it. I think, so that's really the extent of it. And, perhaps Councilman Stein's idea, right? We'll let Mr. Solomon, we'll let King Solomon be the split the baby and decide what the right answer is, and we'll see where we go from there.
Good deal. Well, I'm looking forward to a resolution. I can't wait to see what we come up with.
Thank you, Councilman Banks. Councilor Langster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Attorney Don Diener. You really made an excellent case. I sat here and listened very intently. And could you tell me again, what would the 75% equate in dollars and cents?
I estimated to be about $178,000. It's $238,000 is the appropriation that Metro has given in the mayor's proposed budget for the district attorney. So 75% of that would be somewhere around 178.
178. Mr. Chairman, could I not place that on the wish list? 75% equals 100 and
178.
178, could that not go on the wish list, please?
You're certainly at liberty to do that, Council Lady.
Mr. Cooper, I would like to place that on the wish list because you have to remember, to me, I'm sitting back here thinking, you represent the least of those in our community. I mean, those who are really down and out and really they can't afford the services of a private attorney, the court, the judges, the court orders your attorneys to represent these individuals, and that's what you took an oath of office and your attorneys to do, to represent them to the best of your ability. But it sounds like to me the caseload is astronomical. I mean, it's really heavy.
It is.
And to lose, after you train someone, work with someone, they're in court every day, and you said you lost 3 lawyers in 1 year.
So far this year, we've lost 3.
And this is just almost the 6th month of the year. How many more left? But they're getting the training, they're getting the experience, they're going to court, and then they get to the point where the money is not equaling enough to all the time that they spend in law school, staying up nights, reading and all of this. This is their first job. And they can go someplace else and make more money. So we can't fault them for that, but we still need to help those individuals in our community who can't help themselves. And I think it's only right that this council steps up and, of course, get the letter from the legal director, but I would still, while that letter is being written and time is clicking on the clock, that when we have to pass this budget, I again reiterate that I would like that on 75% on the wish list. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady.
Thank you, Council Lady Lancaster. Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you. Just a quick question about one of the numbers on page E12 in our budget book under operating expenses. You're showing almost a 400% increase in travel, tuition, and dues. It's not $45,000, not a great deal in terms of what you've been talking about, but still a 400% increase in a line. Could you explain to us what that represents?
I can. When I started at the office in 1996, we had a travel and training budget, and that travel and training budget sent me to some conferences to learn about handling certain types of cases. As the years have passed, and certainly before I even became the public defender, budget reductions had essentially eliminated our travel and training budget. And when I say travel and training, I mean all travel. We have 3 cars assigned to our department, to our agency. And that's for 70 people to use, 70 employees. If they have to travel to West Tennessee to a prison to see a client, it's difficult to take a metro car out of county. And so they have to use their own car. And we don't reimburse for travel at our office because we don't have it budgeted and haven't had a budget for it in years. And so as we looked at the possibility of having state funding coming in, we felt it was important to try to put some money in place so that employees who were being asked to travel out of the county to go see clients in prisons across the state, to go see clients in jails out of county, to travel locally to the CCA facility, to travel for training purposes. I mean, we've asked employees, frankly, to pay for their own training for years now. And in an office where lawyers are starting out making $45,000 a year and have law school debt that they have to pay, we felt that one of the benefits that hopefully we could give to them with this new added state funding would be to start making sure that their travel was paid for and that their training was paid for. One of the most expensive items that is included in the $45,000 is a training program called Gideon's Promise. We had a sort of friend-raiser for Gideon's Promise here in Nashville several weeks ago, to which I extended invitations to the council to come. It is a great training program. It is the best public defender training program that is out there today, and it is for public defenders practicing in the South, where traditionally the work is harder, the caseloads are larger, and there are special needs or special circumstances that our clients face in the South. And so the Gideon's Promise training is a 3-year program for new lawyers that has a total cost of $18,000, but costs us $5,000 to send somebody. Their scholarship funding, for the last several years, they have been funding our lawyers to go there with their scholarship dollars. We started out paying $250 for a lawyer to go to that training, and that's because they gave us scholarship money for the rest of it. Their scholarship money is starting to dwindle now. And I felt like it was important for our office to continue sending lawyers to this training. We can't replicate the training here, and it's stellar. It provides trial training, it provides just training on being a public defender, and it is a 3-year program. So a large portion of the money, it's again $5,000 for a 3-year program to send a new lawyer to it. And so we felt that placing money in the budget with our new state dollars to be able to fund that training for our lawyers was a priority.
So how many lawyers will you be able to do then with this money?
With that money, I think what we budgeted for would be to be able to send 4 lawyers each year to the new lawyer training. And that's frankly, we'll have 5 new lawyers starting at our office in August. Because turnover is that high. So it'll send 4 new lawyers. They also have a graduate program that costs about $1,000 a year. It would send 1 lawyer to the graduate program. It also has a trainer development program, which each person costs about $1,000 to go to that training, to teach them to come back and try to teach the same types of things to the folks who don't get to go to the Gideon's Promise event. So it's going to send, on an annual basis, it would at least send 4 new lawyers, and then the balance of the training and travel budget would cover other training programs for other lawyers. Each lawyer is required to have 15 hours of training every year, just like police officers are required to have in-service training every year. And generally, I think Metro covers the expenses for other skilled employees to make sure that they have their training. And so in addition to Gideon's Promise, we would make sure to cover the training for our other lawyers, as well as the travel expenses that I addressed.
Okay. Well, I can assure you that this body can identify with you in non-reimbursement of travel, and also whether it's in vehicles or out of town or to training or seminars or whatever. Our travel budget is mostly nil, and has been. So you talk about your turnover rate. So if you're investing in these 3 or 4 lawyers every year, do you require a commitment to the people who participate in this training program to at least stay with you for a period of time to recover that investment?
Well, first of all, Gideon's Promise requires a commitment to stay with the program for the full 3 years for you to come. Now, is that enforceable? No, it's not, frankly. But they are asking, certainly, that you sign on. And I don't know that we can require anybody to stay on as a Metro employee by virtue of sending them to a particular training program, in much the same way. I guess you could train a police officer to go through the academy, and if they decide to leave employment a year later, we may have something in place to recoup the cost from them, but I don't, if there is, I don't know about it, but I'd be willing to hear about it.
Mr. Riebling, is there anything in any of the departments that requires, I mean, if an employee participates in an expensive training program or activity, and is there any way to recoup that cost if they just soon after that decide to leave the employee?
So I'm not aware of anything, but I'll do a little checking on that. Obviously, we don't do a lot of travel government-wise in general. I don't think so, but I'll double check. Let me double check that for you. I know what you're asking, and if we're going to spend $10,000, send somebody some special training, we ought to get some kind of commitment out of them for a period of time. I don't think
Either
there's
get a commitment or have some kind of
clawback
agreement that they have to pay part of that back if they don't stay during a period of time.
I'll check on it. I don't think there's anything like that in place, but I'll look into it to get back to you.
I think as we recruit people, we really try to recruit people who have the ideals that we're looking for, who have a commitment to indigent defense, and who intend to stay. And I think everybody who I have hired, when I've interviewed them, I have always felt that that was their commitment. Now, life happens. Things happen, and people find that their interest rates on their student loans, which are variable interest rates, have changed, and now they can't make the payments, or they have personal circumstances. We had one lawyer get married and move to Texas. So sometimes those things happen, but for the most part, we've now graduated 5 people from the 3-year program, and they are all still with our office. And we have 1 enrolled in the graduate program. We will, in about 6 months, graduate another 5 lawyers from our office. And I feel confident that those lawyers are committed to staying in Nashville.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Claiborne. Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman Matthews. Could I just put an addendum, Mr. Cooper, on Councilman Stein's request, which is, can we look at, and Ms. Diener, correct me if I'm wrong, the last 3 years, the ratio of public defender to district attorney for local dollars? Can we just have a sort of summation of that? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Reedland could get that for you.
But I can get it for you, sure.
Okay, so we could just get it broken down by year. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Evans. Seeing no other council members in queue, Ms. Diener, I'd like to thank you for your office's service to our city, and this concludes your hearing.
Thank you.
Sorry.